Welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Haydock, get a friend to choose a story and their favourite things about each episode, and I have to try and guess what those favourite things are.
Hello, Toby. My name is James Goss, and I write things for Big Finish. I write target novels, and, well, that's what I do. And you've asked me to nominate a story, and I'm nominating For to Doomsday because nobody else will, because they're all wrong. Because For to Doomsday is For to Doomsday. And I hope you're about to enjoy For to Doomsday as much as it's given me pleasure over many, many years since I first saw it.
Well, hello everybody, Toby Haydock here. I'm sitting on an ever-decreasing sofa. I really need a new sofa. This one is collapsing under my weight. I mean, I'm not making aspirations to my own girth, although I could do with losing a few pounds. As I record this, I've finished off the excess of consumables left over from the Christmas period. However, that is not going to diminish my enjoyment of this process, although we are going to be watching For to Doomsday, as James Goss told you there, which I think is quite an odd fish, and I'm not sure what my opinion of it is. I want to love it, because I think my impression of it is that it has a certain offbeat strangeness about it, but then I'm reminded of some of its perhaps less, shall we say, competent moments. But let's see. I'm not... Anyway, let's not... I've got 4 episodes to get through. I shall perhaps reserve some of this comment for when we're talking along some of the scenes where people are wandering around a spaceship a lot or watching some dancing. I'm delighted that my companion for this is James Goss, who is a delightful fellow. I would urge you to seek out his work, although I'm sure you have. If your Doctor Who consumption has got to the point where you're sort of scouring through the dregs of what's left available that you haven't experienced, which is why you're doing this. The wine of Who is drawn, and the mere lees is left this vault to brag of, and the lees being the sediment at the bottom of the barrel is a comedian watching a not very well known Peter Davison story. But James Goss is an illustrious guest. I don't know him very well. We have socialised on occasion, and he's helped me out with a couple of contacts and things on occasion. But I like him. I don't want to embarrass him. I like his energy. I like his sense of humour. I think of it as waspish, and then you spend some time in his company. It's not. It's actually very charming. He's not catty, but he's amusing and he's quick. And I love his writing. I love the sense of humour that leaps. So I remember did he do a production notes, or he stood in for a column in Doctor Who magazine one month. I think it was a production notes. I remember being terribly disappointed that it wasn't Russell T Davies doing it, and then went, "Oh my God, this guy's really funny. He can really write." And then, of course, I realised that he wrote lots of other things, and I've had the pleasure of enjoying a lot of his work and a bit of his company. So I'm thrilled that he's doing the podcast, and I'm sort of even more thrilled that he's doing For to Doomsday, because, yeah, I'd have fun with James Goss watching Caves of Androzani, but I somehow think I'll have more fun with James Goss watching For to Doomsday. So with that in mind, I have my BritBox fired up, and I am going to press... I do have it on... Should I be watching the Blu-ray? No, well, too late now. This is easier for me. So I am going to press watch from the beginning on episode 1 of For to Doomsday. Thank you for joining me. Let's go into space. And I'm going to press select in 3, 2, 1. So here we are. This is the first story that Peter Davison recorded, isn't it? This is his debut as Doctor Who, because he'd been given a few stories to bed in before recording Castrovalva, which is, I think, about 4th, which is a kind of smart idea. So his debut performance is sort of snuck under the radar. I remember being terribly excited at the title 4 to Doomsday, because I was not a fan of the single word Christopher H. Bidmead story titles. I know a lot of people love them because they're vague and intriguing, but I wanted Terror of the Somethings, Attack of the Somethings. Doomsday is a great word. Doomsday Weapon, of course, was the title of not a Doctor Who story that was actually called Colony in Space, but I had the book and it was the Doomsday Weapon, which I love as a title. I love the word Doomsday. Oh, and there's a modern Doomsday. Doomsday is a good word. This is an excellent opening shot, and I love this piece of music that was on an album that I had. But that's a really nice, they're sort of going for the big spaceship flying overhead that Star Wars does, and it's not quite the same, but it's a reasonable approximation. And the blue screen, I'm assuming that sort of, you can see slight bit of fringing, but it's above average. I think that's an elegant opening. I actually like this elegant pace. The TARDIS landing. We see we have the spaceship, we have the quiet wherever it is that the TARDIS lands. This I find a bit odd, though. I remember this, where we start with totally redundant action just to give everybody something to do. So Adric tells Nyssa to go somewhere. She doesn't go anywhere. She doesn't need to go anywhere because the other two people are in. So that's a bit of business that's wasted everybody's time. But of course, it's quite a crowded TARDIS. The design in this story is excellent, as is actually the lighting. You can see why sort of Andrew Cartmel, when he came in, decided to get rid of sort of scenes where people chat in the TARDIS. But actually, I remember not minding them at the time because it was sort of it was life on the TARDIS. It seemed to me an organic part of the show that you'd have the beginning in the TARDIS and you'd have the coda in the TARDIS, where and there was sometimes a bit of business or a joke or something that sort of bookended the story, and that felt sort of kind of comfortable. But now we've got no time for that in the modern world, and I can understand that development, and there's not an awful lot that thrills me about these scenes, but I don't dislike them. I think this is nice. The attempt to go, okay, well, we're not necessarily going to be able to breathe when we go outside. You can't do that with every single Doctor Who story. It's more likely that if you land in alien environments, you're always going to have a problem as a human or as a Time Lord or whatever, somebody with our sort of biological makeup, that the atmosphere, every story would stop dead in its tracks if it was like, well, before we go outside, we've got to do all sorts of things and put on all sorts of gear. But the fact that the series will occasionally go, but sometimes we'll take that into account. Davison is working very hard here. He's walking around the set, stroking it, chef's kiss, having fun, getting used to playing Doctor Who, and he's a busy actor. Which I've said this before about Davison. He's very. I mean, he's still a very good television actor, but for television of this period, where you don't have the same kind of cutting, where essentially you've got three cameras on a three-walled set. So when you see an actor go from one end of the set to another, there's no sort of there's you can't cheat much of it with cameras and editing. So the actors have to keep it interesting, and Davison, I think, is an exemplar of that. The Monopticons, grabbed by the Monopticons, is always funny. I don't know why, but this is a very good effect. I think they're really convincing, and they're a nice thing. That could easily be done with just a security camera, but they're a bit of fun. They're a sort of setting point of the story. You always want a sort of science fiction thing, and the fringing on here is not bad at all. It's imperceptible. So I think they're a very strong, and they're a nice idea. And I like this kind of, he's taking his time. Yes, he is, Tegan. That's right. You've brought me to what I was saying. I actually don't mind. It reminds me a bit of 60s Who, this, in a way, in its sort of exploratory pacing. Now, I wouldn't like it if all Doctor Who was like this, and I probably wouldn't like it if Doctor Who was like this now. But as an exercise in nostalgia, there will be an occasion where I quite fancy watching a story where people walk around a spaceship quite slowly. And I do like the gag of always missing Heathrow fatigue, and I think that's quite fun. I don't like the nice chap called Burt Russell is an attempt to joke that. I've got to be positive. I do struggle with how they try to characterize Adric. I know he's supposed to be a bit of a precocious teenager, but that precociousness needs to come with a certain sort of lovability, and I think they struggle with that. I was in love with Nyssa. Interesting, isn't it? Because they're both very beautiful women, but I had my heart was for Nyssa because I was younger, I guess. But I wanted to marry Nyssa. I love Nyssa, and I like her outfit as well. I like her velvet thing. But obviously, I like I've since had occasion to go for the stroppy, bossier ones of the Tegan mould. So life's a journey. I think the lighting here is excellent, and I think the set design by Tony Burrow is excellent. And Tony Burrow, I failed to. I often get emails when they're doing making-ofs for the Blu-rays going, where are these people? And Tony Burrow is an Oscar-nominated set designer. He got an Oscar nomination for the film Richard III. He's been Emmy-nominated. He's won a BAFTA. Was designing movies till 2007. So you think, well, he's going to be easy to find. He's interviewed in the Doctor Who 20th anniversary Radio Times special as well, and there's a picture. So you sort of go, oh, well, I know that's now 30 years old, but I think of it as quite new because I remember when it was new. So you think, oh, these are all people that are about. And we never got hold of Tony, who would have been a great contributor to the recently filmed Two Doctors documentary, for example. And so you go, wow, maybe he just doesn't. And I knew Richard Bignell had written, and he'd not heard back. So you think, well, maybe he just doesn't want to be involved. So God bless Tariq Latif, who is somebody I've engaged in many conversations with on Twitter. One of those lovely cyberspace back and forth, who just mentioned that 20 years ago he got a lift with Tony Burrow, and I went, wish we could find him, and he went, I'm still in touch with his son. And so, exclusive everybody, Tony Burrow, who has not contributed to any of the DVD and Blu-rays, just spent last week 2 hours on the phone with me. So, as an accompaniment to this commentary on Happy Times and Places, we're going to have not a commentary so much as we're going to have a little extra that is not available anywhere else, which is an interview with Tony Burrow. Probably just a short gallop through his who's for non-patrons. My Patreon people get stuff that is, well, they get it quicker, which means they get it fuller because then I don't have to worry about editing it and I can just slap the whole thing. So there are advantages and disadvantages, I guess. But I'm so delighted to have discovered Tony, because I kind of knew I'd worked. His brother's an actor called John Darrell, and I worked with John years and years ago. He said, my brother designed Doctor Who, and so it's nice to find out how John was as well. John, a very colourful, fruity Shakespearean actor. Perhaps too big for TV, but he'd have been good in a Doctor Who. He'd have given a lot of colour to. He'd have been an excellent Richard Mace or something like that. But I've digressed. Apologies. I don't apologise because I feel there may need to be some digression. Well, maybe not. Maybe this is more interesting than I'm giving it credit for, because I think, look at that lighting. I'm assuming it's Don Babbage doing the lighting. It's glorious. I think I think it's really atmospheric. I think it conjures spaceship. I think it conjures technology, but it also makes for great pictures. It's really well done, and it complements Tony Burrow's excellent, sturdy, double-level sets. And I love the way you see the light on the other side of that sliding door. Nice sliding door as well, with an accompanying sound. So I think that the lighting, the sound, and the design are all working wonders here. And I think John Black's direction is elegant. He did Keeper of Traken as well. That's not to say it's perfect, but I think it suits look at the light coming through the ceiling and coming from the sides, coming through the grills. Yeah, they're working really hard, I think, because they've realised that this is... Oh, and then the door slide. We don't see that door slide, but we see it slide because we see the light. So I think, and I think because it is it's setting up a mystery. It's not telling us anything yet, or it's telling us little snippets. And it's. I think if it reminds me of anything, it reminds me of 60s Doctor Who. I think I've said that because I don't think Doctor Who was ever quite as odd again as it was after the Hartnell era, actually. And yes, there are stories that are surreal, but surreal is a stronger word than odd. There are stories that are avant-garde, which again I think is slightly more robust in its strangeness than odd. I think this story is odd, and I think that is one of the things in its favour. How Can Earthlings Have Penetrated Us is one for the fans of cheap jokes at the expense of dialogue that is perfectly reasonable in context. But I've thrown it out there just because I like to please everybody. And you can add your own punchline to that. But I remember as a kid, because this is a new story to me. This is I'm well remembering Doctor Who now, and I remember as a kid aching for a story about Doomsday. Doomsday conjures images of... Well, I remember being a bit disappointed with the book of the Doomsday weapon as well, because it promised all sorts of alien creatures and claws and things on the cover, and it was colonists squabbling with miners. And I was like, oh, and it's not even called the Doomsday weapon because you read in the bits it's based on a story called Colony in Space. So I remember being a bit disappointed by that. I am Monarch, and I am Monarch. You look as if you might be. Some of the jokes in this, I have to say, I don't get. Oh, and Enlightenment and Persuasion. I don't think we ever quite get decent close-ups of Enlightenment and Persuasion's masks. Stratford Johns exudes a laissez-faire authority, a natural authority. He's not acting big, he's not acting king, but he has enough presence that he has a quiet, just that slight lean forward that he's doing, but he's not spitting out his dialogue. He's he's doing a bit of enjoying it there, but he's generally he's got that sort of casual confidence about him, and he does all the sort of nonsense well. And Nathan Turner liked his Z-Cars actors, and I remember, that was a thing. Whenever there was a Z-Cars person in a Doctor Who, somebody go, "Oh yes, it's so and so from Z-Cars," and they all ended up doing it in the end. Most of them, no Jeremy Kemp or Joseph Brady, but we had Stratford Johns, Brian Blessed, Frank Windsor, Jimmy Ellis. And I remember sort of thinking, oh, well, because everybody knows they are from Z-Cars, I'm not that excited about them. And then you go back and realise quite how important Z-Cars was and how damn good those actors were. Stratford Johns and Frank Windsor are extraordinarily good in those early Z-Cars episodes because they have a naturalness about them that is quite stark for television of that time when you compare it to what surrounds it. And he was a strong actor, Stratford Johns, and I think he does this really well. Not to mention Annie Lambert and Paul Shelley, who I'm sure that we'll talk about. But I'm reminded that I remember not only was it called Four to Doomsday, it was written by Terence Dudley. Now, I didn't know who Terence Dudley was. I wasn't, on point enough to realise that he was the guy that directed Meglos. That's interesting, isn't it? That he's we don't really think about Terence. We know of Peter Grimwade as a writer and director and a very different beast at both. But Terence Dudley sort of brought in to direct Meglos, which nobody writes home about. And then they go, "Can you write some as well?" And there's some beautifully kind of cross exchanges between him and Eric Saywood. Dudley doesn't seem to have been anybody's favourite person, and yet he manages to carve out a career at the BBC for years. But for me, because I'd got a shelf full of books by Terence Dicks, the very fact that somebody was called, and I had an uncle Terence, but because I wasn't, my reading wasn't amazing because I was when this was on? I was 6 or 7 but I saw just the fact that it was written by someone called Terence, to me, evoked Old Who, and of course everything that was on before I was cognizant, or before my memory, automatically had an allure and a sheen of greatness, because it was before my time, so therefore better. I've always been a nostalgist. No, nostalgia is things that you remember from the past. I'm worse than I'm nostalgia for time before I existed. Is this one of your dropping times? Although the subtitle said drop it. Is it drop in or is it dropping? The subtitle said drop in, but it does sound like you're saying dropping. I don't care. This is not Heathrow Airport. I love what Stratford John's doing. This is not Heathrow Airport. He does as a sort of statement of fact, even though he doesn't sort of know what Heathrow Airport is. But then that laugh he does is great. That he's sort of joining in, but he's also menacing, and it's a great mask. Is it Dorka Nieradzik who did the makeup? I'm guessing it was. She's also interviewed in that Radio Times 20th anniversary special, which is a great stop-off point. For me, it was where that and Doctor Who: A Celebration. In fact, I'm going to do a podcast about an Indefinable Magic, I think, about the celebration and the 20th anniversary Radio Times special, because I think they are the things that made me cross the Rubicon from boy to fan. In just 7 days, I can make you a fan. Yeah, it is a really good mask. But I love the fact that Adric grasped the theory of relativity, and Tegan is the best drawer in the whole world. I remember my sister, I think, was watching this at the time, and us go, would she? Wow, they're really good. I enjoyed art, and I like that slight threat that he gives, because there's not been an awful lot of menace apart from the fact that the aliens are green. But look at that! She's a superb draftswoman, is Tegan. She's wasted on getting lost in space. She should be at art school. Yeah, and because of course those doors would have been quite clattery, and smooth movement, bit of Dick Mills sound effect, and you get something special. And look how solid these sets are, and the double level and the robust. In a show that does have sort of weakness and clatteriness, with control banks and scenery and stuff like that, I think this is great. Now this is interesting. Now, interesting box. Look to the bottom of your screen, and I think you will see, yes, the head there of a special effects person crouching behind the control panel. I think Stratford Johns is giving a different performance here. I've got a feeling these are his first scenes, so I think his makeup is slightly different. But I also think he's being a bit more of a sort of gruff alien. And I think this scene, and maybe his last scene, where he gets shrunk, are in here. And I think are in the first... I could be completely wrong about this. Yeah, this is too primitive for my technology. I'm doing sort of alien acting. And I think somebody's had a word and gone, I don't think you need to do that. And so then he's gone for the slightly more naturalistic, and I think more effective. And I like unnaturalistic acting in Doctor Who. I like big acting in Doctor Who, and I think sometimes you need that sort of Shakespearean heft to give grandeur to, or to match the unusualness of the situations. But I actually think I like it when Johns goes the other way with that casual authority that he has, playing against the strangeness. If you say past I actually was at school with a guy who said past the sodium chloride, and I liked him actually. He was a nice chap, but I find it massively punchable now. Sorry, and I'm not a violent man, but now apparently there's the chances of Tegan knowing this language are impossible, but it doesn't matter. I think it's quite nice when you have she's a companion and she's Australian, and they go, well, let's have something in the story that can bring that into play, even if it's just for a moment like this. I think that's intelligent use of the companion, even if it's totally unlikely. And I there's something very interesting about having the different cultures. I think it could have been explored better if they'd given these characters a bit more to do other than dancing. Time spent dancing, I think, could have been spent, examining the cultures and the different characters' reactions. Philip Locke, I can't quite get to grips with whether I think Philip Locke is brilliant in this or awful. Again, it's quite an odd performance, and in some moments I find him heart-rendingly beguiling and strange and offbeat. At other points I find him really odd and tonally misjudged. But I find that a bit with the direction as well. I think some of it is sort of elegant, and some of it is clunky. It's a weird mix. And Bert Kwok, a legend, a national treasure, and that's a terrible joke. I'm Lynn Futer. You'd never have guessed it. You're in the best. That's awful. It's just on every level, and he's had a few of those, Davison, sort of witty comebacks to somebody saying their name or something, and him saying something, vaguely, almost sort of racist. I'll say something and you're a frog-like alien, so I'll say something back that seems like a quip but isn't, and same with it. Yeah. The jokes in this aren't great, shall we say. And Tegan's drawings have come to life, which is a nice, strange thing, and you can see now that it's the wonderful Paul Shelley, excellent actor, and Annie Lambert, who is in a lot around this time, and you have one of the weirdest cliffhangers in all of Doctor Who, and Stratford Johns gets second billing. Love that. Love it when a guest actor gets promoted above the companions. I don't know why, I just do. I think it's because I think Stratford Johns should be credited above Matthew Waterhouse. I think Paul Shelley should be as well. Paul Shelley, we'll talk about Paul Shelley in future episodes. But it's a really strange, and I remember when it happened, going, "Oh, I expected cliffhangers to be more like, kill him now," and all of that. But do you know what? I kind of like it. It's weird, and because you don't have to wait till next Saturday either, because there was 2 episodes a week. I think it is a kind of oh really, what and as I say, this isn't particularly what I wanted of Doctor Who at the time, but I find myself, and also, part of this is that I do get to talk all the way through it, which means that some of it's some of the time that it takes to unfold, I have managed to fill by gassing. That's the nature of a commentary. And if I was purely watching this, would I be checking Twitter or, having a quick go on the cricket game on my iPhone or something? I might be, but I think that's a conversation to be had about our wavering attention spans. I think there's enough in there that's beguiling, that's offbeat, that's strange, that's different. And hey, one of the joys about Doctor Who is that infinite format that it has, and this wants to be a strange. I think the sort of mix of cultures thing is very interesting. We don't quite know what the plot is yet. There's a vague sort of semblance of threat. There's certainly an interesting villain that you want to see more of in Monarch. There's this, but we don't know what the story is, and it's a kind of WTF, as the kids say. So I enjoyed that, even though it is a bit strange, and I think I think the TARDIS is a bit too crowded, and I think some of the writing of the Doctor and Adric in particular is leaves something to be desired. Its sense of humour is I think slightly skew-if, but it has other bits of sort of offbeat dialogue and stuff that I think are quite charming. And also, I think, Stratford Johns does brilliantly with some of the stuff that he's given. He just makes it seem so right and seem so interesting. Good actors can just make nonsense baffle. I think the phrase I'm looking for is that I know. It's the phrase that came into my head as soon as before I started stumbling. It good actors can make smell sweet is the phrase. But the thing, and I suspected I was gonna. Well, I thought I might choose the sets actually, and I'm not just saying that because Tony Burrow has given me an interview. I've always liked his work, and I remember the last time I watched this, being really impressed with the design work. But actually, what really, and I wouldn't be surprised if it gets mentioned again and probably becomes one of my things. Interesting though, because James is a writer. He's gonna like weird things because he's a funny fella. But I have to choose the lighting, which I think is, I didn't even check, I think is Don Babbage. I just think there's a really strong use of lighting there, and it's compensating for a lot of wandering around corridors, but it's so inventive. There's so much attention to detail in it, and it's not just the light streaming in from off when the doors slide open and coming through the grill, but then there's the different coloured lighting, that red stuff that red hue in the bay where in the laboratory where the TARDIS lands. And I haven't even mentioned the music, which I also like. I'm going to say Don Babbage's lighting is my favourite thing about episode 1 of 4 to Doomsday. What is James Goss's favourite thing about episode 1 of 4 to Doomsday?
The best thing about episode 1 of 4 to Doomsday is the corridors, because it is the best looking spaceship that there has ever been in the history of Doctor Who, and I think you should fight me.
The corridors. Do I get half a point for that? I mean, I did talk about the set design. That might have scuppered me for the set design as well. Damn. I did talk about how the corridors were lit. Well, look, if it comes to a photo finish, which it won't, I might take a sprinkling of victory to nudge me over the finish line from episode 1. But let's see, eh? Well, look, we've got 4 episodes till the Doomsday of this particular run of Happy Times and Places. Well, only 3 now. 3 to Doomsday. We've got 4 choices till Doomsday because James has to choose 1 from each remaining episode plus 1 bonus thing. So we'll see if my vague crossover with James in episode 1 helps me with any of the 4 more choices till I face the Doomsday of yet another failure to get anywhere close to a victory in Happy Times and Places. I've torturously tried to do 2 4 to Doomsday appropriate bits of wordplay there to tie it in with this, but I think it means I've made more sense of what 4 to Doomsday means in Happy Times and Places than I ever have quite with the story. But anyway, I enjoyed that. I found that interesting and odd and strange, and I think it's partially because it's not a story I visit a lot. See, there's always something in Doctor Who, isn't there? So, join me for the next 3 episodes. But for now, enjoy the rest of whatever it is you're doing today, and come back to me when the rest of these episodes go out, where I can guarantee you a little bit of enlightenment and perhaps a little bit of persuasion that 4 to Doomsday is not as bad as you thought it was. Thanks very much indeed. Ta-ta. Well, thanks ever so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock. My guest this time around is James Goss, who can be found on Twitter at GossJam. I would like to thank him. I would also like to thank all the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include James Gould, Gary Gillett, John Elledge, Mark Dakin, John Curley, Andy Case, Paul Carnahan, Alex Kafajoglu, Robin Bland, Rick Byatt, Will Brooks, Kevin Ashelford, Peter Adamson, Luke Adkins, Ruben Herfindahl, Peter Burns, Peter Harness, Ronald Hayden, Rob Leonard, Stephen Moffat, Richard Straw, Nick Tedston, Legion Henderson, and Ian K. McLachlan. The music for these podcasts is by Dave Gates, and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you would like to join that list of names, you can do so by going to patreon.com/Toby Haydock, where for as little as £3 a month, well, you could have listened to this about 6 months ago, and also availed yourself of bonus materials and exclusive releases. And there's various other bits and bobs as well, a bit of access, Ask Me Anythings once a month, that kind of thing. £3 a month is the minimum tier, and most stuff is available at that. There are a few little extra trinkets as you ascend the sort of scale of tiers, but it's fairly egalitarian. And most stuff is available at the lowest possible figure, which can get even lower if you sign up for a year, because you get 10% off. So if you fancy that, that's a great way of supporting these podcasts. But I know that that is not always desirable or even possible. And if it's the monthly commitment thing that daunts you, well, you can go to ko-fi.com/Toby Haydock whenever you're feeling a little bit flush and flush my way. Where you can guess where you're flushing to. That's where I belong. But Ko-fi just enables one-off payments. But look, I expect nothing. I'm just grateful to you for listening. But what costs you absolutely nothing at all, apart from a little bit of your time, is to go to iTunes or wherever it is you get your podcasts from, and to give these podcasts 5-star ratings. That just really helps to make us stand out from the crowd, and a couple of lines of review as well, to give a little bit of colour, to lure a few punters in. That's really very much appreciated. These are also available as videos on YouTube. The videos come much, much later than the podcasts, but go to Toby Haydock's YouTube channel, sign up, there's stuff there. I'm also a stand-up comic. I do live comedy every Tuesday at the Bread Shed in Manchester, a comedy night called Excess Malarkey, which is very cheap. It runs on a not-for-profit basis, but gets fabulous comics from all over the country. And in fact, as I record this, again, this will be in the past by the time that you listen, Joe Lycett is making another under-the-radar visit, which is what he does quite often when he's got new material to try out. He's called it the best club in the world, frankly, so I think he sort of knows what he's talking about, but that's the calibre of act we get through our doors. We also support grassroots comedy. We have a monthly version on Twitch as well, twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey. That's also got an archive of the lockdown shows that we did when we couldn't do the live ones anymore. But we're back live every Tuesday at 8 p.m, and those Twitch shows are once a month, first Sunday. I actually fancy an avocado pear now. Quite like the way it says avocado pear. I do like avocado. I'm on a diet. I've got a headache. Why am I on a diet? Oh, I don't know. It's just as you get older, you stop being able to do things you like doing. Apart from watching Doctor Who, that's the only thing I haven't been... the only thing I've never had to give up. Does that because it's not unhealthy? Because it is unhealthy? No. Yeah, I've had to stop things that are unhealthy and nice. And I think Doctor Who is nice, but it's clearly not unhealthy. It depends what your definition of unhealthy is. It's got fewer calories than an avocado pear. So there.